everyone, welcome back to the channel. This is Randy here with AGM. In this video, we are talking about night vision in general. So kind of treat this video as kind of an introduction, an overview of, generally speaking, just night vision. So with night vision, there's a lot of things to consider. Image intensifier tube differences, housing differences, there's different mounts, different setups, different applications. And if you're getting into night vision, it can actually be kind of overwhelming and a little bit intimidating. So this video is really designed to kind of brush all of those a little bit and give you guys that are less familiar with night vision an introduction to basically how this works and why you might be interested in getting some. So to get into a little bit more detail with night vision, there are a few primary things that we kind of need to touch on. One of them is the difference between Generation 3 and Generation 2 night vision. What I'm referring to there is essentially the intensifier tubes that are inside the pods. Currently in the market right now, there are really two choices. There's Generation 2, which is an older technology, and Generation 3. Without getting into too much detail, the difference between those two categories of night vision tubes really comes down to the tube's ability to, or the tube's sensitivity to light. Generation 3 is just generally speaking brighter, more sensitive to light, and therefore a little bit more easy on your eyes, better to use, especially in really dark situations. That isn't to say that Generation 2 doesn't have its place. There are just differences between those different tubes. Also, when it comes to Generation 3 over Generation 2, we're also talking about a price difference. So that's something to consider as well. Now, beyond the generation of the intensifier tube, you could probably break those down into two color categories. You might be familiar with what you see in movies and in video games, that green phosphor coloring. That's pretty common, but today, especially in the commercial market and especially with more advanced, SF, military and law enforcement units, you will see a lot more white phos. And white phosphor essentially is a little bit more expensive, but provides a little bit better contrast when you're looking at the image quality. So a lot of guys prefer white over green. It's generally speaking less fatiguing on your eye, and it's kind of the premium color of choice if you're spending a lot of money anyway, and for that reason a lot of people prefer white phos. Now, outside of the generation and the color, the primary thing that a lot of people like to look at when shopping for night vision devices in general is the quality of the image. And that can be broken down into a number of different specs that are kind of overwhelming to go through in detail. But we're really talking about signal to noise and halo, and we're talking about how grainy or clear the image is, but it can be summed up in general with a figure of merit number that is assigned to each tube. So if you're not familiar with the manufacturing process, basically every intensifier tube is made and there's just inherent blemishes sometimes and inherent imperfections in the process. Some tubes come out of the manufacturing process, think of them like diamonds. They come out really high quality with a high image clarity, and others come out with lower image quality, maybe with more manufacturing blends. But generally speaking, those are the things you need to be looking for when you're shopping for night vision. Do I want Generation 2 or do I want Generation 3? Do you want green phos or do you want white phos? And then once you've decided those things, how much image quality do you really care about? Those things you need to consider before you dive into all the different mounting applications that you're going to be doing. And another quick note, when it comes to manufacturing of night vision intensifier tubes, we actually don't manufacture those. In fact, many night vision manufacturers, places where you can buy and source and purchase night vision, we're all buying tubes primarily from a few different manufacturers, right? You've got your big three, Photonis, L3, you've got Elbit, and we actually use all three of those depending on the application, the product that we're trying to put together, or maybe some contract or law enforcement opportunity. We actually source tubes from various places as well as other components and build varying degrees in quality different night vision devices. So just keep that in mind throughout this whole process. All right, so beyond tubes and image quality and all of those other things, when you're getting into night vision, you're really only talking about picking up either a single pod system, what I will call this monocular, like a PVS-14, very common, extremely popular, perhaps the most popular night vision unit in the world, or at least in the US for sure. And then you've got dual tubes or binos or goggles, where there are 2 pods and you have 2 intensifier tubes for each eyeball. That's really what we're talking about. So a few things to note on that. If you're gonna go with a single tube system like a PVS-14, right off the get, the tube is the most expensive part, so the cost on this is gonna be drastically less than the cost on binos, right? The applications involved with both of these can also vary a little bit with how you intend on using your night vision device. For example, your PVS-14 can be helmet mounted, it can be weapon mounted, you can take it off and use it as a monocular. There's just generally speaking a lot more things you can do with a single monocular, but it's also more limiting in terms of your perspective and your depth perception per se compared to binos. There's a little bit of a debate on this, but generally speaking, binos are better with almost all applications, and there's plenty of reasons for that. But whether you go with a single tube system, a single monocular, or binos, there are some things that you should be aware of before jumping into this. One of which is that we make the unit, but we don't make all the other stuff that goes with it. And here's what I'm getting by. When you buy a PVS-14, it's common that they might come with this J-arm that will attach to Rhino style mounts like this, but we don't make mounts, right? And a lot of manufacturers, this is the same, right? So what I'm getting at is, if you're gonna purchase a night vision unit, you have to consider purchasing some kind of mounting system that goes on the unit that then attaches to your primary mounting system that attaches to your helmet. So there are a lot of different accessories that you need to consider when getting into night vision. It's not just, I have goggles, now I'm ready to go. Well, once you've purchased goggles, you're probably gonna need at least like a good bump helmet, and then you're probably gonna need some kind of mount, like the Wilcox G24 right here. Something like that would be fantastic. So helmet, mount, and then night vision device. If you're running 2 PVS-14s, now you have a bridge piece that you need to buy, one for each monocular, and then you need a mount that attaches to the bridge, and that mount will attach to a helmet. So there's lots of things to consider with whatever choice you go to, but it's not just a one and done, you buy night vision and you're ready to go. You have to buy accessories, and you have to think about how you're gonna put all this together. So now let's talk a little bit about the primary differences when it comes to using either a monocular or a dual tube system like these binos, like our NVG40s. When you're running a monocular, keep in mind you're using an analog system. So night vision is a lot different than thermal, if you're familiar with thermal. Night vision is analog, and you can think of it as more or less looking through the device, because everything's happening in real time. You're actually looking at light that gets changed in the process to electrons and hits phosphor and all of that inside here, but it's still analog. What I'm getting at is you're essentially looking through a tube on your eye. So when you're using just one monocular, one thing to consider is that you're just generally speaking not gonna have the same kind of aided vision or depth perception that you would get with 2. Now, there's a little bit of a debate on whether or not you have true depth perception when using a dual tube system, but I can say just from lots of experience, once you've gotten used to wearing binos, if you've gotten used to both systems, there's a definite advantage you have on knowing how far and how much depth you have when you're doing various activities with dual tubes over a single tube system. And dual tubes definitely shine, and they win in that regard. So that's something to consider. Outside of that depth perception gain, there really isn't much of a difference in terms of what you could do with this that you can't do with this. It's just this feels and is better at doing it. You have more situational awareness. With a dual tube system like this, like with our binos, you can roll one out of the eye if you need the use of one of your eyes. You can roll them both out of your eyes. You can flip the whole thing up. There's just a lot more versatility in a dual tube system when it comes to wearing night vision that you have over a single tube system like the PVS-14, especially if we're talking about mobility in driving. A lot of guys that go driving at night, it's much easier to do if you've got dual tubes. Driving a truck, driving a side-by-side with IR lights or what have you, if you're going hunting, much easier to do, especially when you get out of the truck. If you're gonna hunt and you're going out to a spot, a blind, and you need to step over holes or cactus or sagebrush or whatever, you can do that a lot easier with a dual tube system. And that is where night vision shines just in general. It's that depth perception and mobility use. All right, so now I want to talk about night vision applications. Why would you be interested in picking up night vision? So outside of the mobility use, you can also shoot with night vision. So what I'm getting at is you can drive, you can walk, you can see in the dark, which you really can't do with thermal that well. But with night vision, the barrier to entry is just, generally speaking, a lot more in depth, and it can be expensive. So I want to talk about that a little bit. You can go really expensive and go a route like this and get yourself set up with an infrared laser. And this will enable you to do a lot of fun things at night, right? You can use your night vision device, you can get this set up on a tripod, you can activate your laser, you can call in coyotes or shoot hogs, and you can paint them with the laser, and you can actually have a great time with a setup like this. There are obviously going to be some differences between hunting with night vision versus hunting with thermal. Generally speaking, thermal's just better and easier when it comes to hunting, but that isn't to say that you can't do it with night vision and have a great time doing it. But if you're going to get into night vision, you just need to understand you could spend a lot of money on that kind of setup, or you could spend very little amount on that setup. So for example, I've got that rifle here, but I've also got my basic little go-to kind of rabbit killing pistol here, right? So I've got a cheaper infrared laser and then just a simple infrared light, a light head right here. And then this thing lets me shoot jackrabbits, possums, raccoons, whatever, anything really at night. And you can run around with night vision and just plink. We bring this to demos. It's 22 long rifle, it's quiet, it's cheap, and it's a blast to get out there and have a great time and use night vision and have fun doing it. So there are some options available to you depending on if you want to set up your gun a certain way for night vision, or if you're just interested in the mobility aspect where you want to be able to drive and navigate and move in the dark. Night vision is really going to be the answer for you. All right, guys, so that is your basic overview of night vision. And it's realistically, it's really basic. I know that there is a lot of information to digest, especially if you're talking about the deep specs involved with creating night vision devices and comparing them. It can be very intimidating, but generally speaking, to recap, you're getting into night vision. You need to consider what generation you want to get, what kind of image quality you want to get, and that includes what color, whether it's green phos or white phos. And then whether you go with a single tube system or a dual tube system, there are helmets and mounts and brackets to consider that will differ depending on what setup you go through. Now, the advantages and disadvantages to dual tubes over a single tube, obviously dual tubes being more expensive, they're just generally speaking going to provide you with more night vision aid as nods do in general. Not to say you can't have a ton of fun with a PVS 14. Most guys getting into night vision first pick up a PVS 14 because it is so versatile, and then later they pick up a second one so they have one for each eye, and that's a fantastic choice. And then outside of that, if you're wondering if you can get into night hunting or if you can actually shoot and play and hunt with night vision, the answer is absolutely. You can get out there, you can drive, you can walk around, you can actually hunt and take animals and have a great time doing night hunting with night vision. Albeit the barrier to entry is a little bit more expensive because the devices are expensive, and then you've got to think about lasers and infrared lights and other things that you have to set up on your gun to enable you to shoot under the aid of night vision. But having said all that, once you get into all of that and you've experienced both, if you're someone who has thermal optics and night vision optics, most people agree it is a blast. You generally speaking kind of need both to really get into this hobby and have a great time, and night vision is a ton of fun. So a lot of information to go over there. If you have more questions or anything you want to drop in the comments, go ahead and do that. You could obviously look up some more information and details on our website, and we'll see you next time.